The silent pursuer. I was sitting alone at home. The night was dark and the street outside was completely silent. The clock had passed midnight, but I couldn't sleep. Looking out the window, I saw the empty street and a strange feeling washed over me. It was too quiet, unnaturally quiet. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. My heart started pounding. Who could it be at this hour? I slowly approached the door, holding my breath, and listened. Silence. No footsteps, no voices. Just the eerie stillness of the night. With trembling hands, I turned the doorknob and opened the door. But there was no one there. I stepped outside, looking left and right, but the street was empty. Then I noticed something at my feet. A letter. I picked it up and brought it inside. As I held it, a strange sensation ran through me. It felt unnaturally cold. There was no name, no address, nothing written on the envelope. Nervously, I opened it. Inside there was only one thing. A heart drawn in red ink on a plain white sheet of paper. A chill ran down my spine. What did this mean? Who had sent it? And most importantly, why, that night, as I tried to sleep, I suddenly heard strange noises coming from the kitchen. It sounded like someone was cooking, pots clinking, the stove turning on, and something bubbling. But I was alone at home. My heart started racing as I slowly got out of bed. Every step toward the kitchen felt heavier. My breathing grew shallow. The closer I got, the more intense the feeling of unease became. When I finally reached the kitchen doorway, I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. My eyes widened in shock. The stove was on, and a black liquid was boiling in a pot. Thick, dark steam rose into the air, filling the room with a strange, bitter smell. I looked around, expecting to see someone, anyone, but the kitchen was empty. My hands trembled as I reached out and turned off the stove. The house was silent again, but something felt wrong. As I stood there, staring at the mysterious black liquid, I had a terrifying thought. If I was alone, who turned the stove on? I woke up feeling uneasy. My body was heavy, and a strange chill lingered in the air. Shaking off the drowsiness, I got up and walked to the bathroom to wash my face. As soon as I looked at the mirror, I froze. There were fingerprints all over the glass. Long, smudged streaks, as if someone had pressed their hands against it from the other side. A shiver ran down my spine. Slowly, I reached out and wiped the mirror with my sleeve, but the marks wouldn't disappear. It was as if they weren't on the surface, but inside the glass. Then, something even worse happened. A figure appeared in the reflection. It looked exactly like me, but its face was empty. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank, featureless face staring back at me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in terror, but the figure moved with me, mimicking my every motion. And then, for the first time, it did something I didn't. It tilted its head and smiled. That night I had a strange dream. I was in my room, but something felt off. The air was heavy, and the silence was too deep. Then I noticed her. A woman stood in the corner of my room, her long hair covering part of her face. She wasn't moving, just staring at me with a chilling smile. Her presence felt wrong, unnatural, as if she didn't belong in this world. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I was trapped, forced to watch as she slowly tilted her head, her smile widening. Then I woke up, or at least I thought I did. I sat up in bed, trying to calm my racing heart. But then, I heard it. A soft, eerie laugh. It wasn't coming from my dream. It was real, and it was coming from the darkness beside my bed. I turned my head slowly, fear gripping every inch of my body. Something moved, and then I felt it. A cold hand wrapping around mine. That night, just as I was trying to forget what had happened, my phone started ringing. The sudden sound made me jump. I glanced at the screen. The number was unknown. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to ignore it, but the phone rang again, and again, and again. I finally picked up, my hands trembling. Silence. I waited, my breath caught in my throat. Then I heard it, slow, heavy breathing on the other end. "Who is this?" I whispered. No response, just breathing. Then a voice, low, almost a whisper, but clear enough to make my blood run cold. "I'm with you." The call ended. I stared at my phone, my fingers frozen over the screen. The room suddenly felt smaller, the shadows deeper. I wasn't alone, at least not anymore. Still shaken from the phone call, I tried to convince myself it was just a prank. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, when a strange feeling made me look up. My window was slightly open, letting in the cold night air. Then I saw it, a handprint. It was pressed against the glass from the inside. My breath caught in my throat. The print was fresh, as if someone had just placed their hand there. But I was alone, wasn't I? Heart pounding, I slowly approached the window. The air felt thick, heavy, as if something unseen was watching me. I reached out to touch the glass, but before I could, the curtain suddenly shifted, like something had moved behind it. I froze. I wasn't sure if I had the courage to look, but I also knew whatever was here wasn't going to leave. I stood there, frozen in place, staring at the curtain that now gently swayed as though a breeze was passing through it. But the air in the room was still, too still. I hesitated before slowly moving toward the window. My hands were clammy, my heart hammering in my chest. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. When I reached the curtain, I pulled it back with one swift motion, but there was nothing behind it. Relieved, I let out a shaky breath and turned to walk away. And that's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, just beyond the reach of the dim light, something was moving. A shadow. It was stretching, growing larger as it shifted across the floor. I could see it moving toward me, slowly, but with a purpose. I froze, unable to breathe. The shadow, now closer, took shape. It wasn't just a shape on the wall. It was something, someone, standing in the corner, almost like a figure waiting to pounce. I turned to reach for the light switch, but before I could, the room suddenly plunged into complete darkness. And in that darkness, I heard it. Soft, steady breathing, like it was coming from right behind me. The darkness in the room was suffocating. I couldn't see a thing, but I could feel it. Something was wrong. The air was thick with tension, and the quiet was broken only by the sound of my own frantic breathing. Then I heard it. A faint rustling sound, like something shifting on a shelf. I froze. The sound was coming from the bookshelf across the room, where I kept my collection of old books. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the noise grew louder, more distinct. Books were shifting one by one, as though they were being moved by unseen hands. A few fell to the floor with soft thuds, and I heard the unmistakable sound of pages turning. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot by fear. Then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, but clear enough to send a chill down my spine. "Come closer." It was coming from the bookshelf. I could feel my heart thundering in my chest as I slowly inched closer to the shelves. One book fell from the top shelf, landing at my feet. I picked it up with trembling hands. The cover was old, faded, and when I opened it, my blood ran cold. Inside, my name was written in dark ink, and every page repeated the same chilling phrase: "I'm coming for you." The moment I read the words in the book, everything around me seemed to freeze. The air grew colder, and the silence became deafening. I closed the book quickly and stumbled back, my mind racing. How could my name be in there? Why was it written like that? My hands were shaking as I stood there, trying to make sense of it all. But then, my mind returned to the woman from my dream. I hadn't thought about her in a while, but now, she was all I could think about. That night, I had another dream. She was there again, standing in the same corner of my room, just like before. But this time, she wasn't just smiling. She was moving. Slowly, she walked toward me, her footsteps soft but deliberate. She didn't speak. She just reached out and took my hand. Her touch was cold, like ice. And when she spoke, her voice echoed in my head. "You're mine now." I awoke in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. My breath came in ragged gasps, but it was the mark on my hand that made me stop. I looked down at my palm. There it was, a black, swirling symbol, like something had been carved into my skin while I slept. It was slowly growing, moving beneath the surface of my skin. Something inside me screamed, but I couldn't move. I knew one thing for sure. She was real, and whatever this was, it was just beginning. That night I couldn't escape the feeling that something was coming, something inevitable. The shadows in my room seemed thicker, more suffocating. Every sound was amplified. Every creak of the house felt like it was a warning. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the mark on my hand. It was still there, twisting and growing with each passing minute. It burned as if it was alive. Then a knock. It came from the door. Soft at first, like a gentle tap, but then louder, persistent. I stood up, my body trembling, my breath shallow. I didn't want to open the door. I knew who it would be, but I couldn't stop myself. I approached the door slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I finally opened it, there she was, the woman from my dreams. Her face was still empty, but her eyes, those empty, hollow eyes, were staring straight into mine. "You knew this day would come," she said, her voice cold and final. I tried to speak, to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat. The air was thick, suffocating. She stepped forward, and I instinctively took a step back. But there was nowhere to run. "I've been waiting for you," she whispered, her voice like the wind rustling through dead leaves. "And now, you'll never be alone again." As she moved closer, I could feel the darkness around me closing in. My vision blurred, my legs gave way beneath me, and the last thing I heard before everything went black was her laughter. And then, nothing. I woke up, but I wasn't in my room. I was somewhere else, somewhere darker. The air was thick, and the shadows clung to the walls like sentient things. And standing in the corner of the room, just as before, was her. She smiled, the emptiness of her face a mirror of my own terror. "I'm with you now," she said softly. I didn't scream. There was no point, because I knew she wasn't leaving, and neither was I. Since that day, I've never been alone. She's always with me, and I know that one day she'll come back.